Welcome to the Ride This Out podcast, where we talk about how to improve your mental health and strengthen your connection to nature and your community, all through one simple solution: the bicycle. My name is Zach Golding, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and mental health therapist. I'll be your host as we discuss the power of pedaling. All right, welcome into this week's session. I talk with Ben Masters of Pennsylvania. Have you guys ever wondered how to start your own business? Have you ever wondered about making a new craft or living off grid, building your own house, whatever it might be? That might seem a little extreme, but the whole idea here is something new, getting into something new, teaching yourself how to do something. Well, Ben talks about that process for him. He runs a business called Crank Therapy. I love the name, first and foremost. And it is a pedal-powered sewing machine where he repurposes old bicycle inner tubes and makes wallets from them. Ben's a super crafty guy. He talks about how he got into this. He talks about how he got into cycling and what it's done for his mental health, specifically his depression, and how it was recommended by a therapist, his specific therapist, to get out and cycle more, and what it's done for him over the last 10 years. So great conversation. Thank you for listening. Share this with somebody that you think might benefit from it. Please give me a review. Go ahead and like it, share it, subscribe, all those good things. And enjoy this week's session with Ben. All right, Ben, thanks again for joining me on the podcast today. If you want to just start off by introducing yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do, just all those good things. So go ahead.
Yeah, right on. Well, thank you very much for having me on today. My name is Ben Masters. I live in Pennsylvania. You probably found me because I built a bicycle-powered sewing machine. And on that bicycle-powered sewing machine, I stitch up wallets made out of old inner tubes and other recycled materials. And I live in an off-grid house that I built with my wife several years ago, and I try to ride my bike almost every day.
Yeah, I was looking at your Instagram. I didn't realize that your house is completely off grid, Ben.
Yeah, we built it in 2006. It's 20 by 20, so it's a small house, not tiny, but not big. And we have some solar panels, a battery bank, and yeah, all off grid.
That's so cool. Yeah, and I love the tour you give on your Instagram of your house. I was watching that. I think it's amazing. So what inspired that? Like just the whole off grid and just, that whole aspect of it.
Yeah, well, it kind of interlinks with cycling to some degree. I joined the Peace Corps after college, and so I lived in Zambia in a really rural area. And if people wanted something, they basically had to do it for themselves. So most people built their own small houses, and that gave me the inspiration. I was like, oh, that's so neat that you could build your own house. I guess in my view before then, you had to be a professional or go through many years of schooling to be able to build a house. But if you keep it small and simple, you're able to do it yourself. So when I came back home, that was always a big dream of mine. And when my wife and I got together, it then became a dream of ours. We built a little cabin on some family land before we built this, and that gave us the confidence to be able to give it a shot. Yeah, and then we built it in 2006. It's off grid. It's a timber frame house. And we did have help with things. So those things that were a little bit too complicated or difficult, we were able to get either friends or families or neighbors. We did have an Amish company actually help. It's a timber frame, so it's post and beam, which is really very beautiful. And so we had some help cutting that out. And so yeah, it's quite a neat process, but it came back to getting the inspiration from having lived abroad.
I love it. Yeah, and it is a beautiful home. I mean, the tour that you gave, it's amazing. So great job. That's amazing. So
Thank you.
tell me, yeah, how did you get into biking, into cycling? Was it something that you always did as a kid or picked up
Oh,
later?
yeah, right on. Well, I definitely cycled a bunch as a kid, but it was mainly something that, just all kids did. So you go visit your friends or family, or you just ride around your block. But it wasn't something that had a super deep connection with me. And again, it wasn't until I graduated college and then I was in Zambia that Peace Corps issued me a bicycle, and that was the only means of transportation. It was kind of my lifeline. all of our lifelines. And so if I wanted to get somewhere, I could either walk or it was much more efficient to cycle. And so that just, got me into the process. And I loved cycling out. I was a fish farming extension agent volunteer. And so I'd go out and visit people and we'd talk about how we could integrate fish farming into their existing farm network. And I just loved it. So every day, I was out there cycling, maybe 20 or 30 miles, visiting people and getting lost and having a good time. And so that idea of using the bicycle as a form of transportation was very powerful with me. And so when I got home, I've been riding for transportation purposes ever since. We do have a car now, so I do use that. We live rurally, so if I have to go somewhere really far, I'm going to use the car. But if it's close or something else, I love to use my bike as a form of transportation. That's been a super positive part of my life.
Yeah, that's great. So, when you say rural, like, how far away are you from like the nearest town?
We're kind of like 10 miles from a bunch of different towns. There's a little town, Carlisle, which is 10 miles away, which is where some actual bicycle inner tubes used to be made. So I think that's really cool. We're like 15 miles from Harrisburg, which is Pennsylvania's state capital. So any of those places, I can get there on the bicycle, but if I go any further, it's easier to use a car.
Yeah, cool. And I would assume, you kind of live in, a little bit of a minimalist lifestyle, right? With your off grid and kind of tiny house. I'm curious how many bikes you have though.
Yeah, that's the caveat, right? So bikes in and of themselves can be a very simple, egalitarian, frugal way to get through life. But there's that N plus one. Your current number of bikes that you really want is what you have plus one more bike. And so maybe there was a little bit of time that that was part of my ethos, but now I probably have 5 bikes, and really I only ride one or two a whole lot. So maybe the other ones I'll pass on someday. But yeah, it is kind of funny that people that are really into having the simple life, they'll generally have more bikes than what they need.
Well, it's justified, right? It's not a
Yeah,
very expensive thing, but it's also, yeah, just something to have. That's
right.
a common theme when I talk to people for sure. They always just have multiple bikes. I love it.
Oh yeah.
So where did the idea of I mean, you first started making clocks, right? Like with different bike
Oh,
parts and then the sewing machine. How did that all come about?
yeah, good eye. You went deep. Yeah, so I like to make things and I like to have that connection to the things that I make. So I wanted to make some stuff out of old bike parts. So the first thing that I did was like what you said, I made clocks out of old chain rings, that thing that's on your crank on the bicycle. Oftentimes you can easily take those off and it's kind of a consumable after several thousand miles, it'll wear out. So I partnered with Recycle Bicycle in Harrisburg and some of their used ones that could no longer be used, I made into clocks. And that got me started. And then somewhere in that process, my wife had gifted me a bicycle inner tube wallet. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So I started sewing to make that, not because I specifically wanted to sew or learn how to do that. That's the only way that you can make one of these bicycle inner tube wallets. And so, after learning that process of how to sew it, there's not a ton of information online, but I fell in love with sewing. And through that, I was like, I'll bet you there's the old treadle sewing machines that you use your foot to be able to power the machine. There's no electricity. I thought that's pretty cool. I'll bet you can put a bicycle on this in some way, shape, or form. So after doing a deep dive, there's not a lot of information online about it, but after some trial and error, and I made a few machines, and now I have 2 machines that are really quite dialed that I've made pedal powered, and it connects all those things that I love.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that in the different videos that you've made showing how it works and just the aspect of it. That's amazing. So is this your main um like source of income, like selling these stuff and making it and everything?
It is for now. Who knows? It's not completely off the ground, but that's my hope. My wife and I have saved up and we have finances to probably make this work for another year. So I'm going to be at it full time for a year and see where that takes me. And this last year has been really great. Probably maybe the last 5 or 6 months. I feel as though I've made some really quality stuff, and I've been going out to some different craft events and just some bicycle events and selling them. And then this last Christmas, I got out to some Christmas events, and then I also have a little Etsy store. And Christmas is a good time to sell these. They make really nice gifts, so that's been great. And yeah, got another year, and we'll see how things go.
That's so cool. Yeah, your Etsy shop, I was checking that out too. It's called Crank Therapy, right?
Yep, all my stuff, my Instagram handles Crank Therapy, my Etsy site's Crank Therapy. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, just so people can find you on there. And I was
Thank you.
reminded when I was watching some of your videos, there was a family that lived in our neighborhood, and they were big on like food storage, and they had a bunch of like wheat that they would grind up, and they hooked up an old exercise bike to it, and they would just
Awesome.
crank it out to like grind up the wheat into flour and stuff. So that's what it kind of like took me back to that. Oh yeah, like you can power so much just by pedaling, right?
Oh yeah, there are so many really cool machines that are pedal powered. There is one nonprofit, I think it's in Guatemala. I think it's called Maya Pedal, and they make a bunch of different things. So people that don't have access to consistent electricity can still do what they need to do but pedal power. So they have a pedal power milling machine like what you're talking about. They have blenders. They don't have a sewing machine, so maybe someday I can connect with them and we can develop something. But they make a bunch of different stuff, and it's just so cool to be able to power something by bicycle.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're riding your bike, you're moving yourself, right? And that power,
Yeah.
that transportation, and then to be able to use it in a utilitarian fashion, right? And actually building something, making something. I think it's genius. I think it's awesome.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and the bicycle to me is really efficient machine. I think it uses our body power. Our legs are really strong, and so I think it's just a perfect energy source.
Yeah. So, you're pedaling a lot for your business as far as like making, these wallets and things. And then I'm assuming you're still riding, like you were saying, you ride to town or whatever. But do you ever just kind of ride just for fun or for health or for any other reason?
Oh yeah. So like I said, my love is commuting, and that's how I started. But the reason I call my business Crank Therapy is probably about 10 years ago, I was going through a pretty intense episode of depression, and I was talking with friends and family, and I talked with a therapist too. And one of the tools that we developed was cycling to help me to mitigate some of my depression. And so I was probably a little too rigid early on and a little too idealistic, but opening up my cycling to just be that time and space for me to be able to work through some issues that I was facing, and to just get in a better space. That's why I call my little business Crank Therapy, because I think that riding, although it does not cure anything, I think that it really helps to give you a solid base to deal with those variables and ups and downs that life inevitably will throw at you. So I ride almost every day as well to just get around, but most days I'm out there just to clear my head. And if I'm getting a little too intense, my wife will say, you need to get out for a ride, and that helps me you know, clear my mind. And always by the end of the ride, I'm in a better place than what I was when I started.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so I'm curious, as you were talking to your therapist and stuff, right? And if they did you just like you'd go out on your own? Would they have like a protocol for you to do? Like as far as like I got to think through certain things, or was it just, hey, I'm just gonna ride and just see where this takes me?
Well, the therapist that I had been working with said just do things that you really love to do, that kind of cover some of the basics. So we had talked about, and I think that this is a really good way to go through life. There are a lot of basics that if you can hit these on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly scale, that it'll just really help. So some of them are like eating well, sleeping well, getting enough there, getting a moderate amount of exercise, just being outside, and finding a purpose, and being able to help others and get out of that your own headspace. So cycling checked off a lot of those, and so it was just get out there and be out there, get that exercise, soak up some of the rays of the sun, and it can be a very social thing. You get to see people, And I've also used it. I've volunteered quite a bit at different bicycle collectives where you're helping other people get on bikes and kind of paying it forward. And specifically on my ride, sometimes I'll just try not to think about anything, focus on my feet and just focus on keeping the pedals moving. And that's kind of a cyclical thing. And for what reason in my brain, that really helps. It kind of sets my brain free when I'm doing such a repetitive motion, but yet you see progress, you make it somewhere, you travel several miles. And so that was really helpful. I've also integrated other things on my ride. Sometimes I like to just see the scenery as I pass. Sometimes if I'm really struggling with something, the bike is the best place to think about it and to come up with solutions, or just to handle whatever's going on. So yeah, I think it can be almost meditative. Again, that's something that we do over and over again, and I think for whatever reason it helps our brains to process. And so I view cycling as kind of meditative.
Yeah, I like what you say there. It just check so many of those boxes, right? That
Yeah.
that meditative state, being out in nature, getting that exercise as well, and then naturally, hopefully, if you're not pushing yourself too much, but you're able to, that will help with your sleep, which that's one of the number one things for our
Oh
mental
yeah.
health. And then yeah, just that, yeah, like you said, that cyclical, just being in that repetitive motion, and that's all that you're focused on, that mindful movement in that section, in that session where you're at. So I love it.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of, I started sewing because I wanted that end product of making a really neat bicycle inner tube wallet. But sewing is repetitive. You're doing something that at the end there is progress, but I find, and there's probably a lot of other tasks as well, that it's repetitive. You can get in that cycle, and at the end, I'm like, wow, now sewing has kind of also, it's part of my therapy. And I had no idea that it was going to do that. But I think there's a lot of tasks that we can do to really help ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever it is, I love that advice that your therapist gave you. Find something that you enjoy, that you love doing, but then, when you're doing something that's productive and you're seeing an end result, so cool. So with
Oh
the
yeah.
inner tube wallets, are you anything else that you're like planning on sewing or like incorporating with your
Oh,
business?
yeah. So, as a small business owner, you're always thinking of new and different things that you can do. So right now I've been focusing on just really learning the craft of sewing, and there's a lot of challenges with sewing rubber inner tubes. There's a lot of friction with the rubber, and so most sewing machines don't like it. So I bought a, a used walking foot machine, and that's what I pedal power. So that's pretty neat. So it allows me to sew really heavy things. So I think next up on the docket, I'd like to either take inner tubes or bicycle tires and sew them into belts that we can use. I think that'd be really cool. I'm a huge fan of bicycle maintenance. I love to fix and work on bikes, just that mechanical aspect where you can, on most bikes, you can see exactly how the bike works. You just look at it, there's a gear here, you follow the chain to this other gear, which moves this wheel that stops this, where there's brakes. Like, everything's very tactile, and analog. And I really love that. And so I'd also like to develop a little tool bag, that you can put underneath your saddle, or maybe a very small bicycle frame bag where you can have what you need on your frame with you. And so some bags, maybe some fanny packs, maybe these the belts. So yeah, there's lots of things that I'd like to try, and hopefully next year I can make some of those happen.
Love it. Yeah, there's definitely a market for that too. All the bike packers, and the commuters and stuff, they're always looking for a way to transport stuff, and to
Oh yeah.
know that their product was made, by pedal power. I think that would be so cool.
Yeah, yeah. Another reason that I make the things, I think, kind of in our society, we have a complicated relationship with stuff. We get a lot of it, and a lot of it doesn't mean much to us. We might go to a box store, we buy, whatever we need, whether it be a clothing or a good. So let's say you get that clothing, you have no connection to it, you don't know where it was made, you don't know how it was made, you don't know who made it. It's just a thing. And then once you've used it a couple times and you no longer care about the thing, it's just a disposable thing. And so, part of the thing that I like about making all of these wallets or belts or bags is now I have a connection to that thing. And now the people that buy it from me, generally they are able to hear my story, or maybe they meet me. And so they get to know who made it, how it was made, when it was made, where it was made, and that now they have a connection to it. So it won't just be a disposable thing. It'll be something that they'll keep, and that they'll value, and that they can connect and have maybe not as complicated relationship with.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. When we first bought our house, 8 years ago or whatever, we were like, "Oh, what should we decorate with this?" And or for our house, and my cousin gave me just such great advice. She just said, don't go to like you said, a big box store and just buy just random things. Like,
Yeah.
wait and use things that actually mean something to you, have a story
Uh,
behind it. And yeah, that is like completely transformed like the feel of our home, because it's like, oh, this piece, this is where we got this, or
yeah.
this is what means something to us. So I hear you on that. That's so
Uh,
beautiful.
yeah. That's a great way to go.
I love it.
Definitely. Yeah.
So if someone is, just starting out into looking into get a biking, or, getting back into it, what advice or what tips would you give to somebody, thinking about it or wanting to jump back into it?
Oh yeah. So for cycling, I think the first thing that you need is a bicycle, and I think the best way to do that is you probably have a bicycle in your garage, or maybe a family member or a friend has a bicycle that you can borrow. So I'd say that's your first, easiest, most economical option. Check your ABCs, your air, your brakes, your chain. Make sure that it's a safe bike. Lube things up, and then get out there and just cycle for a bit, and then that'll give you a better idea of like what kind of cycling you'd like to do, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. And then your next move is, if you don't have that bike, then you can find one. I think getting a used bike makes just a ton of sense, whether it's from like marketplace or online, or better yet, there's a lot of bicycle collectives all around the country right now, and they sell bicycles, and it helps support their mission. And then you can learn how to fix up your bike a little bit, and you know what bike you kind of want. So get a quality bike once you're ready for that investment. And the kind of style that you would like, whether it be for transportation, exercise, or all the above. And then that just kind of helps pay it all forward. And so I think that's the best way. And then I also want to say, if you like to make stuff, the best place to get started is probably YouTube. I have used YouTube to build my house, to understand how to sew. Any technical problem that I have, somebody has been kind enough to film themselves with some solutions. And so I think YouTube's a great place to get started with both riding and bicycle maintenance, getting inspiration and just some of that technical knowledge. And it's a great place to get started. And then I'm just a big fan of buying things that are used, and then you can fix it up and have another connection to that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. YouTube University, right? Like, what did we do
Oh,
before that?
yeah. I don't know, but YouTube University is great.
Yeah, it's the best for sure. You can learn so much. Yeah, and great advice there. The bicycle collectives, we have some out here, and yeah, I'm
You have
with you.
some great ones out there.
They're amazing, and yeah, just the work that they do. They, a lot of volunteer work. People will go and, they do a lot of drives here where they give out bikes to kids, and they're like quality bikes, right? Like they'll fix them
Yeah.
up and make sure that they're all good to go. So I'm with you 100% on that. Supporting a local bicycle collective, they're amazing.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. I think a lot of these places, there is a lot of volunteer opportunities. And I think when we're talking about let's ride this out and let's spread the joy and the love and the transformative properties of bicycles, I think helping other people do that, I think that not only helps them, it also helps us.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that connection to the community and to those around you. That's such an important piece
For
of
sure.
mental health, as well as like feeling a part of something that's, bigger than you, or helping your community out. That's very important. It's great.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, Ben, thanks again, man. I appreciate you,
Yeah.
spending some time with me and sharing your history and your story and everything. I know that this will be inspirational to other people, but yeah, I greatly appreciate. Anything else you want to touch on before we go?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I had a lot of fun, and hope that some of the things I said might be able to help some folks.
No, absolutely. It helped me for sure. So I got some great stuff from it. So yeah, I appreciate it, Ben, and we'll keep in touch, and I'll continue to follow the cool work that you do on Instagram and everywhere else. So
All right. Thank you very much, Zach.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye bye.